The first clue wasn't the new locks. It was the look on Evelyn's face when she watched me struggle with my own key. She didn't look angry. She looked disappointed. Then she held up a small brass key I'd never seen before and quietly said, "If you were coming home, Alfonso, why did you bring the old key?" At that moment, I still believed someone else had turned her against me. I had no idea she had been one step ahead of me for weeks. Looking back now, I realized the mansion was never what I was trying to steal, and losing it would become the cheapest price I'd pay. People love simple stories. A handsome younger man charms a lonely, wealthy widow, moves into her mansion, waits for the inheritance, and gets caught. If that's the version you want, you can stop listening now because the truth is far more uncomfortable. My name is Alfonso, and yes, I made a living dating wealthy women. I wasn't proud of it, but pride doesn't pay rent. Growing up, I learned early that love disappeared the moment money did. My father walked away after losing his business, and my mother spent years reminding me that poor people were invisible. By the time I was 30, I had developed a rule: never fall in love. Love makes people careless. Money makes people predictable. At least, that's what I believed before I met Evelyn Harper. She was 68, sharp as broken glass, and owned one of the oldest estates outside Charleston. Her mansion wasn't flashy. It carried its wealth quietly, hidden behind ancient oak trees, marble floors polished by generations, and paintings that looked too expensive to ask about. She laughed with her whole body. She played terrible jazz records every Sunday morning. She beat me at chess so often that I started pretending not to care. That should have been my first warning. Lonely people don't usually enjoy losing company. Smart people do. I met Evelyn at a charity auction where I had absolutely no business being. A friend had slipped me an invitation because, as he liked to joke, rich widows don't shop at grocery stores. It was crude. It was also how I paid my bills. Evelyn saw through my charm within 20 minutes. "I've met men like you before," she said, while examining an antique clock. I smiled. "And yet you're still talking to me." She smiled back. "Because you're honest enough to lie badly." I should have walked away. Instead, I laughed. That was 6 months before everything collapsed. Living in her mansion felt strangely ordinary after a while. She insisted we eat breakfast together every morning. She complained about politicians, corrected my grammar, and mocked my expensive shoes because, according to her, real leather shouldn't squeak. Sometimes I forgot why I'd moved in. Sometimes I caught myself wondering what life would have looked like if we'd met 20 years earlier. Then I'd see the wine cellar, or the investment reports left carelessly on her desk, or hear her attorney mention estate planning, and my old instincts returned. Everyone has a price. I just needed to discover hers. The first strange thing happened on a rainy Tuesday. I came downstairs expecting coffee. Instead, Evelyn was sitting with her lawyer, Martin Gaines. The conversation stopped the moment I entered. Not slowed. Stopped. Martin closed a blue folder so quickly that several papers slipped onto the floor. I bent down to help. One page caught my eye before he snatched it away. I only saw 3 words: property transfer agreement. Property transfer agreement. He thanked me with a smile that never reached his eyes. After he left, I tried to sound casual. "Everything okay?" Evelyn stirred her tea without looking at me. "Just updating old paperwork." "Sounds serious." "It isn't." She changed the subject immediately. That wasn't like her. For the first time since we'd met, she lied. Or at least I thought she did. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the scene. Property transfer. Why now? Why hide it? The obvious answer came too easily. Her children. I'd met both of them. Daniel, the oldest, treated me like something he'd scraped off his shoe. His sister Caroline smiled too much and asked questions nobody else would dare ask. "So, Alfonso," she'd once said over dinner, "what exactly did you do before meeting Mom?" Evelyn had interrupted before I answered. Now I wondered if Daniel and Caroline had convinced their mother that I was after her fortune. Honestly, they wouldn't have been entirely wrong. The next afternoon, I noticed another change. The security cameras around the mansion had been replaced. New models, better angles. Even the gates opened with a different keypad. When I asked the groundskeeper, he shrugged. Mrs. Harper's orders. No explanation. No warning. Something inside me tightened. People don't spend thousands upgrading security unless they're protecting something or someone. That's when I made my first truly stupid decision. I searched Evelyn's office. Not because I wanted to steal anything. That's what I told myself. I only wanted answers. Her desk was almost painfully organized. Tax documents, letters, medical appointments, receipts. Nothing unusual. Then I found a locked drawer. Of course, the only locked drawer in the entire room. I remembered she'd once hidden a spare key inside a porcelain vase in the library. It was still there. Too easy. Inside the drawer sat another blue folder, the same one Martin had carried. My pulse quickened. Before I could open it, I heard footsteps. I shoved the folder back, locked the drawer, returned the key, and slipped into the hallway just as Evelyn appeared, carrying a basket of fresh flowers. She smiled warmly. "You've been looking for me?" For half a second, I thought she'd caught me. "No," I lied. "I was just stretching my legs." She looked directly into my eyes, long enough to make my mouth go dry. Then she simply nodded. "Good." That evening, she poured us both bourbon. Neither of us drank much. She raised her glass. "To trust." I nearly laughed. Instead, I touched my glass to hers. To trust. Mine was the second lie. Later that night, I walked outside to clear my head. From the garden, I noticed lights glowing inside the guest house. Someone was there. I moved closer, careful not to make noise. Through the window, I saw Martin, Daniel, Caroline, and Evelyn, all four studying documents spread across a table. No one had told me about the meeting. No one wanted me there. Then Daniel pointed toward the mansion, toward my bedroom window. Every head slowly turned in the same direction, toward me, toward the room where they believed I was asleep. In that moment, I became certain of one thing. They weren't planning to protect Evelyn from me. They were planning something much bigger. And somehow, I had already become the target. I spent the rest of that night staring at the guest house from the darkness of the garden, convinced I'd finally uncovered the truth. Daniel was turning Evelyn against me. Caroline was helping him. Martin, her attorney, was preparing the legal paperwork. Everything fit together so neatly that I never questioned it. That was my mistake. The next morning, Evelyn acted as if nothing had happened. She poured coffee, criticized the weather forecast, and complained that I had started buying overpriced imported strawberries when local ones tasted better. I watched her carefully. She never mentioned the meeting. Neither did I. Instead, I decided to test her. "So," I said, spreading jam across a piece of toast, "Daniel called me yesterday. It was a lie." Her knife froze halfway through slicing a grapefruit. "Did he?" For the first time in months, she looked directly at me. "And what did my son want?" I shrugged. "He said he's worried about you." She smiled. Not warmly, not sarcastically. It was the smile of someone confirming a suspicion. "That's interesting," she said quietly. "Because Daniel doesn't have your phone number." I felt my stomach tighten. She had caught me, not with evidence, with patience. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then she stood, carried her plate to the sink, and kissed my cheek before leaving the room. No accusation, no argument. That frightened me more than if she'd screamed. 3 days later, everything changed. I returned from lunch to find my luggage sitting neatly beside the front door. Every suitcase, every jacket, even my golf clubs, the locks had already been replaced. Again. This time, the old key didn't even fit into the front gate. I rang the bell. After almost a minute, Evelyn opened the door just enough to speak through the gap. "You should have called first." I laughed nervously. "Evelyn, what is this? You'll be staying elsewhere for a while." "For a while? I need some space." "Because of Daniel?" "No." "Caroline?" "No." "Martin?" Still no. Her expression never changed. "You." Before I could answer, the door closed. The deadbolt clicked into place. I wanted to believe this was temporary. Then I noticed the moving company unloading boxes from my bedroom through a side entrance. They had already packed my life before telling me I no longer lived there. That evening my phone buzzed. Not Evelyn. Martin. We need to talk. His office overlooked the harbor. Everything inside looked expensive enough to make ordinary people nervous. He didn't offer me coffee. Instead, he slid an envelope across the desk. Inside were photographs. Me. Different women. Different cities. Different years. One photo showed me holding hands with a millionaire's ex-wife in Palm Beach. Another showed me leaving a luxury hotel with a real estate investor in Chicago. There were dozens. Martin folded his hands. Evelyn knows. I forced myself not to react. Knows what? That she wasn't your first wealthy relationship. I almost laughed. She already knew that. Oh. He leaned back. Then perhaps she also knew you accepted $50,000 from Linda Cooper to disappear after their engagement ended. My pulse stopped. That payment had happened 8 years earlier. Only 2 people knew. Linda and me. How did you get these? Martin ignored the question. The interesting part isn't your past. He tapped another folder. It's what you did last week. He opened it. Security footage. Grainy. Silent, but unmistakable. Me entering Evelyn's office. Me opening the porcelain vase. Me unlocking the drawer. Me searching the folder. Every camera upgrade suddenly made sense. They hadn't been protecting documents. They'd been recording me. I sat frozen. You set me up. Martin shook his head. No. You wanted me to search that office. No. Then why leave the spare key where I'd find it? His answer came instantly. Because Evelyn said a man who truly trusted her would never look. For the first time in years, I didn't have a clever response. Because he was right. I had walked into the trap myself. Not because someone forced me, because suspicion came more naturally to me than trust. I rented a hotel room across town. Every evening I drove past the mansion. Every evening different cars appeared. Doctors, lawyers, financial advisors. Once I even saw Caroline crying in the driveway while Daniel argued with Martin. Whatever was happening inside, it wasn't the celebration I'd imagined. Then something unexpected happened. Caroline called me. I think we should meet. You hate me. I never hated you. You could have fooled me. I wanted to. That answer surprised me. We met at a quiet diner outside Charleston. She arrived wearing sunglasses despite the rain. You think Daniel threw you out? She said. Didn't he? She looked around before leaning closer. My brother thinks you stole Mom's trust. And you? I think someone else is stealing something much bigger. She placed a folded receipt on the table. It was from Martin's law firm. Large wire transfers. Repeated every month. Different companies. Millions of dollars. All approved using Evelyn's authorization. You're saying Martin is stealing from her? I don't know. Then why show me this? Because Mom refuses to believe anything is wrong. Maybe because nothing is. Caroline shook her head. I checked those companies. And they don't exist. Every theory I'd built began to crack. Maybe Daniel wasn't protecting an inheritance. Maybe he was chasing the same fraud. Maybe Martin wasn't helping Evelyn. Maybe he was using her. Suddenly I understood why the family had been meeting without me. Not because they trusted each other. Because none of them trusted anyone. That night I drove past the mansion one more time. Only one light was on. Evelyn's bedroom. As I watched from the road, another car slowly entered through the gates. It wasn't Daniel. It wasn't Caroline. It wasn't Martin. A woman stepped out. Young, elegant, no older than 35. She used her own key to enter the mansion. She didn't knock. She belonged there. My chest tightened. I had spent weeks believing I was competing against Evelyn's children. But standing there in the darkness, watching a stranger walk into the house I'd called home, I realized I might have been replaced before the locks were ever changed. And if that woman was who I thought she was, then every lie I'd uncovered so far had only been hiding an even bigger one. I didn't sleep that night. The image of that young woman unlocking Evelyn's front door replayed in my head until sunrise. Every instinct I had screamed the same conclusion. I'd been replaced. It fit perfectly. Evelyn had discovered who I really was, thrown me out, and found someone younger, smarter, or simply more convincing. The cruel irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I'd been the man who replaced others. Now I was standing outside the gates, wondering what it felt like to be disposable. The next morning, I decided I needed proof. Not guesses, not theories. Proof. I waited outside the mansion until the young woman left. She wasn't carrying luggage. She wasn't dressed like family. Instead, she held a thick leather portfolio under one arm and spoke briefly with Daniel before driving away. I followed her. She parked downtown outside an old brick office building. The sign on the door read, Harper Family Foundation. Foundation? That wasn't what I expected. I walked in 10 minutes later. The receptionist smiled politely. Can I help you? I'm looking for the woman who just came in. You mean Ms. Rebecca Lawson? I suppose. And you are? Before I could invent another lie, a familiar voice answered for me. He's Alfonso. I turned. Evelyn stood in the hallway. She looked tired, older than she had only a week earlier. Not weak, just disappointed. She nodded toward a conference room. We should stop doing this in parking lots and behind locked doors. The room was silent after the door closed. Rebecca sat across from me. Daniel leaned against the window. Caroline stared into a coffee cup. Even Martin was there. For the first time, no one seemed interested in pretending. Evelyn spoke first. You've spent weeks trying to figure out who was stealing my mansion. I said nothing. She slid a folder toward me. Inside were medical records, then another, charity documents, then another, architectural plans. Finally, she looked me in the eye. Rebecca isn't my replacement. So who is she? My executive director. I frowned. For what? My foundation. I blinked. What foundation? The one I've been building for 3 years. Suddenly, the wire transfers Caroline had shown me made sense. Not fake companies, new nonprofit organizations. Legal entities created one after another. Martin hadn't been stealing millions. He'd been moving them, exactly as Evelyn instructed. I looked at Caroline. She smiled sadly. I only showed you half the paperwork. You let me believe, because I wanted to know whether you'd investigate the truth. She paused, or settle for the version that benefited you. I had done exactly that. Again. Evelyn reached into her purse and placed a small envelope on the table. My new will. I didn't touch it. You wanted to know whether you were in it. Go ahead. With shaking hands, I opened it. There was only one page, one paragraph highlighted. I read it twice because I couldn't believe it. She hadn't left me the mansion. She hadn't left me her investments. She hadn't left me a single dollar. Instead, she'd left me something else, a handwritten letter. Read it out loud, Evelyn said. My throat tightened. Alfonso, if you're reading this, it means you finally chose curiosity over greed, even if it took you longer than I hoped. The mansion was never meant to be inherited. After my death, it will become a residential home for widows who lost everything later in life. I met you because I was lonely. I kept you because somewhere beneath your performance, I saw a frightened little boy who believed love always came with a price. I stopped reading. I can't finish it. If you ever decide to become an honest man, Rebecca has standing instructions to offer you a job managing the foundation. It pays far less than pretending to love wealthy women. But for the first time in your life, someone would be paying you because they trust you. Gruel. The room disappeared around me. All those weeks, I had been fighting over an inheritance that never existed. The mansion had never been for sale, never meant for me, never meant for Daniel or Caroline either. The locks weren't changed to protect wealth. They were changed because Evelyn had finally realized I trusted opportunity more than I trusted her. I did love you. The words escaped before I could stop them. Daniel laughed bitterly. I didn't blame him, but Evelyn didn't. She simply asked, when? I couldn't answer, because that was the question I'd avoided asking myself. Had I loved her before discovering her fortune? After? Or only once I realized I was losing her? Silence answered for me. Months passed. Evelyn survived another surgery and slowly stepped away from managing the foundation. Daniel apologized for judging me before knowing me. I apologized for giving him every reason to. Caroline eventually admitted she'd never hated me. She'd only been waiting to see whether I would become the man her mother believed I could be. Even Martin surprised me. He handed me a set of keys one afternoon. For a second, my heart jumped. The mansion! He smiled. No, I looked down. The keys belonged to a modest office downtown. The foundation needs a manager. You still trust me? I don't. He adjusted his tie. Evelyn does. Isn't that risky? It is. Then why? Because people who are never trusted rarely become trustworthy. I accepted. The salary was smaller than I'd spent on suits in my old life. The office overlooked a parking garage instead of the ocean. My apartment had thin walls and unreliable heating. For the first time in years, nothing about my life looked impressive. Oddly, it finally felt real. I visited the mansion only once after that. Construction crews were already converting guest rooms into private apartments for widows. The grand dining room had become a community kitchen. The ballroom was turning into a library. Nothing remained of the fantasy I'd spent months chasing. As I stood near the front entrance, Evelyn walked over and handed me something wrapped in cloth. It was the old brass key, the one that no longer opened the front door. I kept it, she said. Why? So you'd remember. I turned the useless key in my hand. It doesn't fit anymore. She smiled. I know. Then she looked toward the women moving into what had once been her mansion. Neither did the man you used to be. I still keep that key in my desk drawer, not because it opens any door, but because every time I look at it, I remember the most expensive lesson of my life. I thought I was trying to steal a mansion. The truth was far worse. I almost stole my last chance to become someone worth trusting. Sometimes the greatest con isn't stealing someone else's fortune. It's convincing yourself that every act of kindness has a price. I spent my life believing money was the only thing worth protecting, so I couldn't recognize the one thing that was freely offered to me: trust. By the time I understood the difference, the mansion was already gone. The hardest locks to break were never on Evelyn's doors. They were the ones I'd built around my own heart. If you were Evelyn, would you have given Alfonso a second chance? Or would you have walked away forever after discovering he searched your office and lied to you? Tell me what you honestly would have done and why. Have done and why. Have done and why. Have done.